Born in Cleveland, raised a hillbilly. What's your story? Welcome to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. Here's your host, Sarah Blossom Ware.
Today I'll be reading Chapter 3 from my memoir about growing up as a hillbilly in Northwest Arkansas. Chapter 3 is called Dad. My dad fully embraced the Southern lifestyle from day one. He took on the slow Southern drawl, both in speech and life in general. Dad really didn't get worked up about anything. Once when I was 15 years old, I came home around 3 a.m. after running around with Jonathan. Jonathan is now my husband, but then he was a 17-year-old boy who had kept me out way too late. My mother had waited up and understandably laid into me in a bit of a panic. "Where were you? Do you have any idea what time it is? What could you have possibly been thinking coming home so late? What type of punishment do you think you deserve for this?" My dad walked into the living room, and Mom commenced to frantically telling him what I have done, and finally said, "George, you talk to her." Dad looked me straight in the eyes and calmly stated, 3 o'clock is not a time to be coming home. It's a time to be going fishing. And he picked up his pole and walked out the door. Dad loved to fish. He truly enjoyed the experience of fishing for hours on end, regardless of whether or not he was catching them. Some weekends when Dad was on duty, he would lead George and me traipsing across the mountaintop to fish in an unknown pond. There were no roads or even trails, so I was always amazed that we could make it there and back home. These were wonderful adventures in the wilderness. Dad would point out trees and teach us the names: oak, elm, maple, and dogwood. The dogwoods are a stunning display of white in the Ozarks in the spring. As much as I have fond memories of our fishing trips with Dad, I also remember being completely parched because the only refreshments he would bring were alcoholic, and he wouldn't share. On one occasion, Dad took the boys on an excursion to Eck Lake. All 3 of them left with shoes on, but the boys returned barefooted. Mom began the interrogation. "George, what happened to their shoes?" Dad, "I don't know." "George and Henry, where are your shoes?" "We don't know," they replied with innocent eyes. Try as she might, my mom was not able to crack this case. It was only a couple of years ago that Dad finally told her what had happened. Eck Lake had been drained, and the boys couldn't resist a super big mud hole. They ran into it to play, but they immediately started sinking like it was quicksand. My dad struggled to free them, but their shoes were sacrificed in the process. I guess I can understand why Dad would be afraid to tell Mom that the kids were almost sucked into the bottom of Eck Lake. Dad was always reading. I seldom remember him without a thick paperback novel somehow stuffed into a back pocket of his Rustler jeans, just to the right of his plumber's crack. He would read newspapers and comic books and historical documentaries and science fiction thrillers. He would even read encyclopedias from cover to cover. Who does that? In the years after we got electricity, Dad would always require us to watch Jeopardy at 4 p.m. if school was canceled due to weather. He said it was so that we would get some schooling for the day, but I think he just wanted to show off because he always smoked all of the categories. We told him he should be a contestant on Jeopardy since he was full of useless trivia. If anyone knows how to hook him up, then contact me. Dad also enjoyed playing cards and board games, but Mom did not. Dad taught me at a very young age how to play Monopoly and Pinochle and all sorts of other fun games that were really way beyond my years. I remember that he was patient with me, but did not show much mercy. Perhaps that is why I'm so competitive now. Dad and I had a you snooze, you lose rule when playing Monopoly, such that when a person landed on the opponent's property, no rent was owed unless that opponent caught it and asked for payment. During the rare times that Mom would play, the guilty party, Dad or I, would wait until the next person's turn and then point out, snickering to Mom, that she'd missed collecting rent. And she always missed collecting rent. She would get so angry and call us cheaters, but it's not cheating if that's your rule. Okay, so let's reintroduce our discussion panel members that are joining us for the first 4 podcasts. I've asked each member to come up with a 6-word summary of who they are. You can also hear more expanded introductions in the first podcast. I'll start. I'm Sarah Blossom Ware, and my 6-word summary is born in Cleveland, raised a hillbilly.
Hi, I'm Gina Chambers, and my 6-word summary is extremely vivid dreams all night long.
Hello, I'm Andrea Shaw, and my 6-word summary is Island Girl Stuck in the City.
Hi, my name is Kathleen Wojcik, and my 6-word summary is pre-physical therapy student and Polish folk dancer.
Hi, I'm Jaimie Finlayson. My 6-word summary is I'm a fun-loving free spirit.
If you're listening in, please leave your 6-word summary in the comments online. Before we move on to the discussion questions for this week, it's time for a segment I call, So What Have You Been Busy With Lately? Kathleen, so what have you been busy with lately?
So as a student, I am busy with taking a variety of science classes here at COD. I hope to apply to physical therapy programs over the summer. And in the meantime, I want to spend my time traveling, meeting more of my extended family, and just taking advantage of any random opportunities that are presented before me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so now for the fun part. We're going to have our discussion about some topics that are loosely related to that chapter about my dad. So the first question that I have for you is, what kind of personality did your father have? What kind of personality does your father have? My father was extremely laid back, still is, doesn't really get worked up about anything, kind of a dad. My mom was more of the kind of disciplinary role in the family. Kathleen, how did it work in your house? What was your dad like?
So my dad was very similar to yours. He was always kind of the laid-back figure. He's also a very jovial guy. He's very outgoing. He likes to talk a lot. He jokes a lot. Just about anywhere we go, he finds someone that knows him or someone he knows. And he also has like this life motto. His 3 favorite words are "take it easy." He doesn't speak too much English, but that phrase, for whatever, always stuck with him. Yeah. So like whenever I leave the house, I'll go, "Bye, Dad." And he always says, "Bye, love you, take it easy." So it's kind of like his approach to life, just kind of taking it easy, take it day by day.
Okay. Andrea?
My dad is very similar to Kathleen's and Sarah's, very laid back, fun and easygoing. He was not the disciplinarian. That was my mom's job. And he was always the one that would like to just have a relaxing afternoon or go to the beach and just hang out, and that just is his lifestyle. Just very, not slow. Slow is not the right word, but just, he takes it easy. Yeah.
Gina?
My dad is also similar. My first instinct would just be to say calm, laid back. It was only the last few years that I found out, always knowing that he was a drinker, but recently found out that he drank to deal with some sort of internal anxiety, which I never would have known, I think, growing up. So I guess he self-medicated for whatever anxiety he was dealing with, but his overall sort of demeanor was always relaxed and like your father, I can't remember what you said he said, but he would always tell me to slow down. And I remember growing up, especially in teenage years, and being very frustrated by that, especially coming back from being with my mom, because junior high and high school, I was raised by him. And I think after spending summers with her, who was the exact opposite, it was, I think now looking back, was very an anxious time for him, for me coming back and sort of just being like a whirlwind of chaos. And so he would always tell me to slow down, and I would always yell back at him, "I'm not running," or "I'm not moving quickly," And so that's an interesting, as I've grown into adulthood, to try to look back and see what was really going on there.
I think it's interesting that everybody's dads are so similar. Like maybe that's a dad trait.
Yeah, dads generally have a tendency to be more laid back. Moms are about, getting everything done, taking care of what needs to be taken care of.
What does that say about me? Oh no.
I don't think it's always the case. I know, men, that's not the case. Yeah. But it's probably more so. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Jaimie?
My father is pretty laid back in the same kind of category here. I love in the book that you said there was no trails, and you were always surprised how you got home. It reminds me of my dad. He no GPS, no map, anything. You put him in the car, he could get anywhere in the country, no problem. You know, I ever am going somewhere, I'm like, Dad, which way do I go? And he's just, take this highway, this way. He knows. It's so funny. Other than that, I would say stubborn. My dad is stubborn as can be. He is the definition of it's my way or the highway. He does what he wants. It doesn't matter. Legalities, not legalities, how it affects other people. It's what he wants to do. That's what's going to happen. And that's my dad. And I feel like that's also kind of extended onto my whole family. The Finlaysons are very stubborn. And late.
All right, so the next question is related to how your parents taught you that they valued education. So my parents, you know, just outwardly, if you were to see how we lived, you wouldn't think probably right away that they valued education, but that's definitely a stereotype. They definitely valued education. They never were asking me, have you studied for this test, or, you know, what grade did you get? Or it was a very subtle way to let me know that they valued education, but I always knew that. My mother went to nursing school after she had all four of us. When my sister Mary Jane was a baby, she went to nursing school and graduated. And, you know, so I'm just wondering how that was stressed in your house, if it was stressed. Gina?
I honestly do not remember much of a value put on education. I mostly did well in school. I graduated high school with honors. I think that there was some emphasis on, you know, congratulatory efforts after the fact, but I really don't think that there was, you know, a lot of encouragement or help per se with homework and projects, and I don't really remember any of that, to be honest with you.
And then, so how do you pass it on to your children? Since
that's a good question.
Really...
I didn't really like school, and especially in high school, I'm assuming it probably had a lot to do with my upbringing. I had a really rough time. I'm sure it was hormonally based, and just structure and family life and all of that. I did well in school, but I absolutely despised it. I mean, there was at one point where I really honestly could tell you I wanted to lock everybody inside and blow up the building. So I was not happy during those years. Began partying pretty heavily. I would show up my senior year in the clothes I had went out in the night before. I was drinking in the parking lot. Even began using cocaine that year. But I still graduated. I graduated the principal sat me down and said, you're either going to graduate with honors and walk with your cords, or you're not going to graduate at all, because I quit showing up. But when I did well. So my father, I don't think he really knew what to do with me, because I had started working at a young age, and he couldn't really say anything to me. So I would just quit coming home, or I would show up to shower and grab clothes. But I always, again, I did well in school. I somehow didn't really get caught by the law, really never got in trouble. So I'm not really sure how that happened looking back on it. And that's why I can only say there has to be divine order, because there's no, I mean, I've somehow basically made it through my life, you know, never been molested or raped. I have gone to jail. That was one time, but I think that was an eye-opener.
I did not know that.
Oh,
there's a few things you don't know about me.
A few things.
So, but I think it was an eye-opener. And again, it happened to be the weekend right before I met re-met my high school sweetheart and my husband, and he happened to be in jail the same weekend in Ohio, and I was in Hawaii.
That's where you met him?
In Vegas. No, we started dating in junior high.
I mean, that's where you re-met him? Was
in Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
in Vegas.
But not in jail.
Not in jail. I just happened to be in jail the same weekend before. But I don't think that my parents, I mean, other than all of the screwed up things that are wrong with my character, I don't know. It's hard for me to see where the value was put in anything, be it education or moral value or character in general. So I do struggle with that. So I try to do the opposite, I guess, is the conclusion I've come to.
Andrea?
I think that my parents subtly showed me that they valued education, kind of like yours did. It was more, what they put in front of me. They pulled me out of public school and homeschooled me because they didn't agree with the public school system and how the public school system was teaching me. And so they began homeschooling me, and that showed me that they had a great value not only for my education, but for me. In hindsight, I hated school. I despised it, like Gina said. But they did show me that, and they would put other opportunities in front of me, you know, just whether it was traveling or getting together with people who knew things and could show me things. And it was a constant state of reading and let's look at this, let's look into this. And so I think that's how they showed me they valued education.
Kathleen?
So I was a little bit opposite of you. I actually really liked going to school. I was that kid. So my parents never really had to impose having to study or doing homework, because I've always just liked doing it. But they would kind of reward us for good grades and things like that. But I think as we got older, they kind of wanted us to understand that they finished high school, but they didn't get college education. So now they're working hard physically. And so they want us to have a better life than they're dealing with right now. So they've kind of value it in the sense that you need to learn, you need to go to school so that you're better off than us not working physically. Kind of that value, I guess.
Okay, Jaimie?
This is interesting for me. I don't want to say that my parents don't value education, because obviously they have to in some sense. If it was very subtle. When I was younger and now, I really enjoy learning. I used to love going to school. I've been an A student with honors for a long time. We're going to disclude my high school years. Those were a little complicated. I didn't follow the best path. I dropped out of high school, which surprises a lot of people. I did go back. I did some alternative school. I have an actual high school diploma, not a GED, but it was complicated. And of all my extended family, nobody really has a degree. My dad, he straight out of high school, went and just continued working for the family. My grandfather started a business so many years ago, and he'd been doing that since he was a kid. So that's just what he kept doing. My mom probably has the highest level of education of anybody, but she doesn't have a degree. She just has certificates in the dental field. And my brother, he did a year of college and dropped out. So there was nobody who was very much pushing, go get a degree, this is very important. But like I said, I loved school and I loved learning, and I always did so well that I don't feel that they really needed to push me. And they had a lot of praise and were always very proud of me, and that's enough to make you want to do well. Your parents telling you they're proud of you, that makes you feel good. It makes you want to keep doing that. Again, we'll exclude high school years. And even now, they, it's not that they really push me, but they are very proud of me.
I should mention the science research librarian at Benedictine University, Cynthia Kremer, actually looked at my questions, so I appreciate that, and she made some comments and added some of her own. So this one was one that she added. What aspects of your parents' personality did you not appreciate until you were an adult? So is there something about your parents that it wasn't that you hated that about them, but you just didn't think about it, or maybe you hated it and now you appreciate it. But so just kind of wondering if you have any thoughts on this. Jaimie?
Well, I would say probably the biggest thing that I took for granted and thoroughly would appreciate now is the level of care. When you grow up, you start paying rent, you're paying all these bills, you're working hard. I pay rent, I pay for school myself. I work hard to do all of these things for myself. And you look back and go, man, I wish I was a kid and I wish mom was still cooking and doing my laundry. I wish, I didn't have rent to pay and I could just go play all weekend and have fun with dad. So not necessarily a personality trait, I would say, but that's the biggest thing that I wish I appreciated more as a kid, how much they did for me. But I do thoroughly appreciate everything they did. And like I said before, with my mom being everything that she did and the way that she just took care of me herself, that's a really huge thing that I appreciate.
Yeah, that's nice. I hope your family and your roommate are all listening because you're saying nice things about them.
Maybe my mom and my roommate, probably not my dad. He's not going to like to hear how stubborn he is. You're not stubborn?
All right, Andrea?
I think for on my dad's part, because he was so laid back, a lot of times things they could wait. And I am very much like, let's get it done now. I need this done now, maybe even yesterday, not like 5 days from tomorrow. And he was always, if we had a project, and I always wanted something done, whether it was rearranging my room or hanging up a mirror. And so I got to the point where I was like, fine, I will just do it myself. And even if I wasn't doing it the right way, it would still get done quickly. And so I think I did not appreciate that about him growing up because I wanted things to get done right away. And he was like, oh, I'll get it done when I get it done, And now I do appreciate that because when you take your time with something, it gets done much more with better quality, I guess, other than haphazard, let's just get it done so it's done, So I do appreciate that about him now.
So when he would do it, it would be done right.
Yeah.
Okay. Kathleen?
Okay, so one personality trait of my mom is that she always stands by her word. So as I was younger, I hated that part about her because being grounded for 2 weeks means I'm not leaving the house for 2 weeks. Whereas other kids, if they got in trouble, I'd be like, yeah, and the parents kind of loosened up. But my mom was very, strict. But now as I'm older, I kind of see that translate into more positive things. So if she says she's going to do something or she's going to be there, she always follows up with it. She never just kind of says something just to say it, which is kind of the opposite of my dad. Like my dad will kind of tell you what you want to hear, and then, you may or may not see that happen. Whereas my mom is very much, if she does say something or say she's going to do something, she'll do it or be there.
That's very admirable.
Right.
Good character trait to have.
Somebody you can rely on. That's nice.
Gina?
So I guess, my dad is easier, and I think looking back how we talked about just their overall personality, I think I really appreciate that now. And it's only been the last few years of, the calm that I really appreciate because I think I lived in so much chaos growing up that it was very difficult being married and having young children and being stable. It was really, really emotionally and psychologically difficult for me to settle down and just be okay with that. I would often find myself not on purpose, but just getting involved with drama, whether it was at church or at co-op or other homeschooling families, and just couldn't afford to necessarily go on vacation. So, then you create debt trying to get the things that you need to do and change things up. Or, obviously when you move into a house and the market drops, you don't move out of that house. So just, changing furniture and things like that. And now I really appreciate the calm and the just sort of lifestyle of letting things go and not getting involved in things and not reacting, and just peace. I really appreciate that much more now.
Yeah, I think it's really neat that you can appreciate things about your dad now. And I mean, it was pretty chaotic, like you said, and that you can be thankful.
Yeah, I struggle with that more with my mom.
Her chapter's next.
Yeah.
She's coming.
Yeah, I think if you can pick one over the other, it gives you something, but yeah.
Okay, so the last question that I have for today's discussion is one from my mom. Have you ever been surprised to learn the real story of an event years later? So like the Eck Lake story, where, it was for 30 years, my mom never knew what was going on with those missing shoes. And now she knows, and we all know what really happened. So I'm just wondering, for you guys, have you ever been really surprised to learn about the real story of something, but much later after the fact? Jaimie?
Well, growing up, my mom kept a lot of things that happened with my dad and things about him and my family from me. She always would say, when you get older, you'll discover these things for yourself. You'll find out. And I mean, it's very true. Every day there's something new I get to learn, and it's not necessarily a great thing either. The biggest thing that really stands out is one day I was at my dad's house when I was living there. This was during the time in which I had dropped out, and somebody had knocked on the door, and I opened the door, and there's just a strange woman I've never seen. She's looking for my dad, asking for child support. I go, well, that's not my mom, so what's going on? And lo and behold, I have a half-sister, and I guess when I was 5, my father had kept that from me, and this is 17, 18 that I found out. So, you know, how many years later, I finally found out that I had a sister.
Wow.
And it was quite a shock. It's very intense, and I'll be honest, I actually have never met her.
Really?
I don't even know her name.
Really? Do you have any desire to?
There is some desire to meet her because, I mean, it's technically my family.
Yeah.
I also feel bad for her being in the situation she is. My dad has only met her once when she was a baby.
Oh.
He's so not involved in her life at all. There is this whole, I grew up being daddy's little girl. Like, me and my dad had a very close relationship, and the idea of, I mean, clearly there was a reason that he kept this from me, and there's some level that I feel like maybe it will cause something between me and him, and I don't really want to hurt him. At the same time, I also feel like I have a right because that is, you know, my sister, and I should be able to meet her. So I was telling you earlier, I plan to move in October, so before then, I do plan to meet her.
Good. Wow.
So he doesn't know that you know even?
No, he does. Okay. So, you know, there was that situation, she's there, and she's like, hey, you have a sister. And so after that, you know, I'm freaking out, and I called my dad, and I'm like, so do I have a sister? He's like, well, who told you? I'm like, oh, that's a great thing to say, Dad. Like, maybe you could just inform me. And that's just kind of my dad in general with a lot of things. He doesn't really communicate. I found out things like that a lot.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's intense.
Wow.
That is an intense one for me.
Yeah.
Oh, so Gina, what do you remember?
So when I was much younger years, 3 till 9 or 10-ish, I was bounced around quite a bit between my mom, my dad, and my grandparents on the East Coast, and they were moving between New Jersey, Massachusetts, and New York. And I spent time in all of those states and moved different schools several times during that time period. And there were times that my mom would be gone. I have a lot of odd memories with different babysitters, and although I never had one after the age of 6, she would be gone for weekends at a time, or a week at a time, or a few days at a time here and there, where we would have a roommate or whatever that would sort of oversee, I guess, that maybe I was bathed that week or sort of went to school or whatever was going on. It was sort of constant chaos. But a few years ago, I was sitting randomly talking with her, and she had just oddly mentioned to me, well, you know what was going on during that time. And like, what is she going to say? I don't know. And she informed me that she was involved in a drug trafficking ring, and she was moving cocaine between Florida and the Cayman Islands. So it was really interesting. It only took me a few minutes to piece everything together at the time, and the people that she was involved in, and the money that was moved around, and I saw a lot of drugs and things like that. So it made sense to me, and it really put the pieces together. But all at the same time, it was sort of shocking that she expected me at 6, 7, 8 years old to have any idea of what was really going on during that time period. So
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
How did it make you feel to hear your mom say that she's doing something like that and just kind of leaving you?
I wouldn't say that it made a huge impact. It sort of like put things together for me. Like, it kind of made sense, I guess, to what was going on. But I wouldn't say that I don't know. I guess it almost maybe even gave her a step up. Like, she actually accomplished something. I don't know. Even though it was something bad, it was like, I just knew her as being like a bartender or a waitress, and I grew up in bars and clubs, and definitely it was the 80s. And if you watch any sort of documentary or anything that was going on in the 80s in Florida, it was completely involved around cocaine and money and just the building up of a whole city. Miami. And that's how I grew up in the 80s. That was my life. It was totally drugs and sex, and that was what I was raised in. And so it's sort of, I don't know, to some degree it kind of brought her up to like a new level. Like she wasn't just low level, she was like high level. So
right up there.
yeah, I
Love the drug dealer.
and it's sort of, I think even in my life too, I mean, I'm surprised that she made it through to some degree. And I mean, she could be in prison to this day. And as far as I know, there's millions in a bank account in the Cayman Islands that, nobody is willing to go try because there's all connection with the FBI and things like that to know that money is sitting there and waiting for somebody to come back and get it, because that's where everything was being filtered. So, I guess to some degree, she moved up a notch, even to not try to go get it, that she was actually smarter than what I thought she was to some degree.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. So
Interesting perspective.
Everything she could to make sure everything was taken care of, even to that point.
For me, you mean, or for what she
For
was
you
doing at
and
the
for
time?
her.
I don't really see it for me. I see it more for herself. Because, I mean, there was too many times where I was pushed away, and then eventually my dad fought to get me, and praise God, he was able to keep me, and she kind of did her own stuff. So I don't really think it was for me. I think the times that she attempted, I mean, she would tell you some people just aren't supposed to have kids. She will say that. So I think that at times she probably thought, I'm the mom, I'm supposed to take care of the kid. And she sort of maybe made attempts to pull it together at times, but it still to this day, she is a total classic narcissist. I'm pretty sure she's clinically bipolar, and I don't speak to her. Her number is actually blocked from my cell phone because she harasses me. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. At this point, I just choose, in a healthy response to it, I choose not to play the game. Like I got off the roller coaster and moving on with my life. So,
Right.
Wow.
and I try not to overly worry.
Yeah.
So, because she is my mom,
Right.
but it is what it is.
But it affects you so much emotionally. And
It
other
has in
things
the
to take
past,
care
but
of.
through a lot of therapy and, my faith, I have overcome a gigantic portion of it. So, I mean, there's 14 marriages between my husband and I's parents. Just the two sets of parents, there's 14 marriages. So the fact that we've been together off and on since junior high, and we're married and we have 2 kids, and I homeschool, and he has a job that provides for our family very well, is the glory to God. There's just no way that it makes any sense, because his background is just as messed up as mine is. There's just no way that you can come out of that and be where we are now. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So.
But you never wanted that for your kids either, so you chose
Well, we
not to.
have had very strong personalities and tried to do everything, but you put 2 people that have very strong personalities that are going in opposite directions, because he's very much corporate, put it all together. Like, I'd still be on the beach, living in a tent, pregnant, and barefoot, if that was what I wanted to do. That's where I was at one point. So he's in the opposite direction. So we are very strong personalities, but we're pulling in 2 opposite directions. So again, it's only by our faith and, like, I guess being stubborn to some degree that we were going to stay together and make it work to get to where we are now, which I can still tolerate him.
You can tolerate him. That's good.
I'm still in love with him. So he recently lost like 40 pounds, and he looks like he's 18 again, so that makes it a little easier.
Oh.
And I'm in my prime, so. Whatever it takes.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
On all that. So, Kathleen, do you have anything that you're surprised to learn now that you didn't know when you were younger?
Mine's kind of more of like a negative outcome. So the one that I can think of is like this couple that got married when I was a little younger. And whenever they were together at any of our family parties, they always seemed happy, like they were a great functioning couple. And then later when I found out that they got divorced, it was kind of like a shock, because they always seemed that like everything was okay between them. So when I got older, my mom kind of told me like the backstory, and it turned out that a lot of like domestic violence was involved. So I think like that kind of showed me that you can't judge a book by its cover, that you can't just look at like couples or just anyone in general based on how they act in public or how they interact with people, when everyone has like their own backstory. That's kind of like a huge lesson, I guess.
It's definitely true. You never know what's going on behind closed doors. I think
Or
that
just
all the
when
time.
you look at someone, I mean, walking in, all these things you're telling us, I would not imagine that just looking at you,
Right.
It's, yeah.
Just stereotypes, which is why, I don't know if you guys see it in the class, but whenever I have an opportunity in the classroom to try to get people to talk about something they're passionate about, or, just talk something personal, I really like to do that, because then, all of a sudden you're going, oh, I didn't know that this student, really was, has been learning German for 7 years, or, basically I never even looked in the back of the room, before, and then you can start to get a lot of a different perspective about, the other students in the classroom, and then maybe even start thinking of that way about people that you meet, outside of the classroom. I love meeting new people, and I always, I know it's stereotypical even for me to say it, it's cliche, I guess, but I can learn something from everyone. And, and if I start getting annoyed at the person next to me on the airplane or something, then I actually tell myself that, and then I can start a conversation, and then I learn something. So that's fun for me, yeah. Oh, how about you, Andrea?
I don't think I have any stories. I can only say that I don't think my parents were very closed. Like, they would talk about things in front of me, and I'm an only child, so I don't think that, like, I was just an extension of them, really, and so they didn't really hide anything from me that I know of. Maybe we'll have to come back to this sometime, but I don't really have anything to share.
Okay. So do any of you have any final thoughts, or anything you wanted to bring up about your dad? Maybe.
I do.
Yes.
I'm super glad that he really was the dad he was, that he was loving and caring and there. And so many kids grow up in dysfunctional families that I just really appreciate what he did to be a part of my life.
You take for granted how much
Yeah.
your dad really does, having a dad around does affect you.
It does, yeah. Even though you think mom does all the stuff, she does all the cooking, cleaning, feeding, cuddling, but really just having dad there as, it just adds so much stability, right? Just to have that person who's constantly there and will go to bat for you and really care for you is huge, huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can really piggyback on that and say, as messed up as my dad was, and how terrible of a boundary setter and sort of rule maker as he was for me, he was, again, my rock. Yeah, he was what I had. As much of a struggle as I had in high school and sort of growing up and early marriage, I can't imagine if I would have spent the rest of that time with my mom. I don't know that I would even still be alive, because I wonder how she is. So I would definitely say I appreciate the struggle that he made.
So thanks again for all of your candidness, and I enjoy these discussions actually a lot. Thanks for listening to the Hillbilly Justice on the School Bus podcast. Tune in next week to find out why my friend was convinced that my mom was driving drunk. Until then, dream big and have fun.